Hey there, Mackenzie. I just got done looking at your document here, and I have some places that I have some further questions and things to think about. But before delving into that, overall, particularly given the challenges that you face this quarter, I have to say that you have done a good job in pulling this together. I think that with some more work, it will be ready to go. I think it's not quite up to standard yet, but it's getting closer, much closer. And so I just want to congratulate you on persisting through. And my goal with the screencast is to give you really specific things to do so you can feel really good about just finishing up and getting it done. So I think the first part is great. I just put this note here because it's going to come up later, but as I was reading through here at the beginning, I thought this waiting list. So the fact that demand outstrips supply for this program is a good thing because you're going to get a nice natural control group that has very similar people in it. So the threats to validity are, I think, reduced to some degree in terms of causality because that control group is, I mean, we've equalized a lot of the factors naturally this way. And so I wonder if they could even employ an RA eventually design because of this, where they have many more people on the list than they're able to put through the program, and so they can actually do a lottery system. That would be the best, of course, for causality. But I like the NR design that you have for this. I think you should go with it. And I'm going to come back to this point when we get to the design part. The 3-day development program, so I don't want you to walk me through everything that goes on in those 3 days, please. But it would be nice to have an idea, especially as it pertains to the logic model. I'm going to scroll down for a bit. What is going on? So this feels like a little bit of a laundry list. What I really care about is this is a 3-day workshop, so many hours per day. Here are the skills they're supposed to be gaining. And I know, actually those are down here, never mind. And then an example of some of the activities. And then you can list a few of these. But for the activities part, these all feel like, well, at least the input side and the activity side feel like laundry lists instead of really giving me a good idea of what's happening. And so can you give me a bit more detail, appropriate level? So again, for the activities, it's going to be putting the time in there. Do participants come from far away? So that's kind of like an input to the program as they're traveling from a long distance, or you can put in the activity section. That's fine too. But just so I know like what's going on. So from talking to you, I know that many people fly in from various locales, and it's a pretty long 3-day thing where they, is it 8 hours per day, 6 hours per day for 3 days? How many facilitators are there that do these activities with them? You know, what is their location like a little bit? And that's here in the the input section. So is it 20 people per time? I think you mentioned it was 20 people per time. So all that can go in here in appropriate level of detail. Just to give me an idea of what it's like to be a participant in this, without, of course, all the detail like regarding what they do in every activity. You could just explain one of these. Well, this is good enough. 360 feedback discussion. I kind of know what that is anyway. So I think this is a good start, but it needs to have just a little bit more conveying to the reader about what it's like to be going through this. And then for the input section, remember I talked about in class at least 3 subcategories of inputs. You have the human capital side, what the participants bring, their unique skills and frames of reference. You have the same on the administrator side, the teacher side, the facilitator side. And then we have the physical and tech resources that are needed to pull this off. And then, the organizational norms and values that have gone into this project. And then you can have miscellaneous category for anything that doesn't fit into those. But that's just helpful to arrange our thinking, to understand what's going on, and just have kind of like a little more organized instead of like a laundry list of stuff. So let's go back up here and continue. So the theory section, I look forward to seeing that. Please don't let it get too lengthy if you can. Just focus on the 3 outcomes you're doing and why these activities should move the needle on those. Okay. So in these couple sections, I'm seeing this theme about high potentials and things, and I'm still not sure about how that's really going to impact inferences drawn or why this program would be successful, especially given that not all of these people are going to be labeled high potentials, right? Because some come in voluntarily of their own accord. And so maybe I'm misunderstanding something, but they were self-selected or they were told they were high potential. So how is that specifically going to impact the study's results, the evaluation's results? So I see your point about labeling high potentials can be damaging in general, but in the context of this program, why is it going to change anything? That is my biggest question. If anything, I would say that would create within-group variability problems, because these people labeled high potentials versus not labeled high potentials will make some difference on the outcome, and if we have too much within-group variability, then that's bad for trying to find an effect. I'm not sure exactly why this matters. So, subjective, why does this matter again why will this impact the success of the program? That's all and I think you mean objective here, but I'm not positive. Same with the unintended side effects. I'm wondering, what are the unintended side effects of this program, not of high potentials? So I agree with you, labeling high potentials is not the best thing, but when it comes to this program, do we expect any effects, I should say, of what they learn to maybe diffuse into other parts of their lives? Do you think that this program may help their family lives? I mean, could be one unintended. I'm just kind of thinking through things here. Could it affect other things? Could it affect their friend life or the way that they, I don't know, just things that, in a good way, I'm thinking of good things now, that they would gain from this that weren't intended. And then for negative things, maybe this program causes some boredom and fatigue, and so they don't get as much out of the program because it's 3 days of sitting around and just kind of, I don't know, I'm just thinking of things. So those are the kind of things I'm thinking about when I'm thinking about side effects of the program itself. And so it's okay to mention high potentials, but this is too much, and it's not really aligned really on target with this program. What does it deliver? And will it deliver things we didn't intend in a positive way or in a negative way? And if you can't think of any negative, that's fine. When I think of this program, I think more of the positive side, except for the fatigue issue with 3 days of training, and maybe like jet lag and just tired from travel. Some of them may have some of that too. So remember to hyperlink in the final. It's really helpful. The Kirkpatrick model, you can just delete all this because unless you can state what these are, and I think from memory, is it reactions to the training, like emotional reactions, did I like it? Learning, what they take away? The learning part is like a manipulation check, I would say. Did you take away what we intended you to have? And so, it sounds like they're already doing that, which is great. And then behavior and then results. And so you can say, this evaluation is going to focus on behavior and results. But honestly, I think yours just does behavior. Let me look at your outcomes. This is sort of behavior. This is more like social capital. This doesn't really fit into the Kirkpatrick model very easily. This would maybe be either learning or behavior. And then this one, behavior. Good. Pardon me. So you're not even really touching results here. Results would be things like probably profitability and subordinate satisfaction and productivity and things like that are more distal from the program. So I would cut out the Kirkpatrick ideas and I know that's what the client wants, but unless you can be more specific about this and say these results will be used to ascertain whether or not we're hitting the third level of Kirkpatrick model, and that is behavior. That's it. That's all you need to say, because I'm familiar with this model, and it's a week. Okay, well, that's good to know. I would say something like this. The prior evaluation. Let's see here. Let me think for a second. The prior evaluation assessed Kirkpatrick's levels 1 and 2 of training effectiveness. That is, participants reacted favorably to the training and they learned something from the training. This next evaluation is going to take it a step further and look into behaviors. Did behaviors change as a result of being in this training? Update, this is good. Update content. I would say demonstrate here. Prove is a strong one. I would just say just demonstrate. This is something as a consultant, try to use this word more than, but I know what you mean. Justify this, great. So the logic model gave you some tips on that. I think the output, outcome, and impact sections are good. Ethical is great. The research propositions look good. I would call it training. Always call it training. Treatment is a more general term, and it also denotes kind of a clinical focus, which we don't have in IO as much. So definitely take out any reference to treatment, even though we do say it in class. It's a more general term. But in this case, we know this is an initiative, a training initiative, development initiative. You can call it those things, or intervention, whatever feels good to you. So for these look okay. Some of the definitions were a little bit clunky in terms of wording, so I'm giving you just some little wordsmithing ideas, the extent to which an individual is confident, blah, blah. For each one, I need to know how they're aggregated to form a composite. That means that there are several items assessing this in the appendix. Do a hyperlink, of course, to those later. And how are you going to have those come together to form a composite so that every person in your database has just one number that represents this outcome, one number that represents this outcome. And so typically we do a mean or a total. That's usually the way we do it, unless your measure is a little bit more complicated, which yours isn't. Thankfully, it's a nice Likert scale. Social capital refers to valuable connections. This is good. You don't have to do so many quotes if you don't want to, but that's fine if that's the thing that conveys what you want to say. I just don't think this definition is as helpful. Network of relationships. I would just say something like, according to these authors, social capital is especially important because blah, blah, blah. So elaborate a little bit on why these connections are important for people to have, and how that's going to impact their performance and the way they treat their subordinates and things like that. So this is less of a research paper. I see kind of a research papery theme through things, and that's not really the focus here. Maybe some in the program theory section you'll want to draw from some prior work, but this is really practical. This is really applied. And so this is less important to me. This isn't saying much to me from a practice side. Just start to, like, from your perspective, why will these connections be, part of this goes in the theory section too, but why will these connections happen from what goes on in the sessions? And then when they go back to their organizations, how do you expect that they'll be using these networks, and why, and how will they benefit from them? And so, I don't know, I can imagine that when people come up against a difficult subordinate, or they come up against a difficult situation in their work, that they have a strategic network kind of, to use Dr. McKenna's term, they have somebody that they remember, sitting and training with, and they feel like they can call that person and talk with them about whatever is bothering them, or give some guidance for a difficult subordinate or something like that. So that's just what I envision from the program. You know the context best, so I'll leave it to you. I'm glad that you have added and modified these questionnaires, because I think when you do this, you're getting more at the essence of the construct that we want, and tailoring the outcome to the program, tailoring that construct that we want to get at. So I think that's great. Manager success, that's a broad concept. This seems too broad, but if that's what they want to, if that's how they want to term it, it's okay. But I don't know. This is not a huge deal, but think about maybe renaming this to something that is more indicative and descriptive of this. So manager competence for coaching and feedback for subordinates, or something like that. A competence in displaying feedback and coaching with subordinates. And then well, then you have to fix the definition, because we don't want a circular definition. And that may not be a bad thing, because I think we want to get at more, what is it about these that are effective? So when I go look at your measure, it's manager success here. I need these labeled with the constructs so I know what they are. Let's see. Will this be taken from subordinates as well? In fact, I recommend that this not be self-report. And I think we talked about this when we were together. Or supplement the self-report with the subordinates. Because they're best able to. This construct, I'm looking at the items. This seems like a catch-all for everything. So it's like, how do you just do decision-making? How do you motivate other people? How do you coach? How do you do the trust aspect? Wow. So this seems like a mashup of a lot of different things, which is okay. So I'm okay with keeping it a manager success, but then to define it, to define it, I think this might be some work on your part. What exactly does all this mean? You know what I recommend for this project? To pick one aspect of this and only ask questions about that, because I'm not sure how you're defining this and actually conceptualizing it. This seems like just too much even for me to think about. I would keep it to effective coaching, or a coaching feedback model, and that is going to be narrower in bandwidth than all of this. So, let's see. Part of it is just I'm unsure about what all these things are. So part of it is I'm having trouble giving you really good feedback because this isn't still really super organized and thought through. So I'll do my best here. I recommend narrowing the bandwidth of this construct, the manager success one. And I recommend that it be just a few items. So maybe just coaching competence. And so you would ask each manager subordinate something like, I feel like my manager is invested in my development. I feel like my manager helps me to understand my role and my tasks. My manager gives me feedback on my performance, where I can improve areas for development, and what I'm already doing well. I feel supported and listened to. So you develop like 3 or 4 items that you think encapsulate manager coaching competence, I would call it. I don't like this measure. It's too broad, and this definition is too wide a net. It's capturing too much. And then so I recommend that you develop the measure yourself. Keep it narrow and precise definition. The extent to which a manager displays behaviors toward the subordinate that are I don't know how you want to word it, but you have to work on that. You have to struggle through it. So to the extent that the manager displays certain behaviors that are consistent with a support of a subordinate's development and task-related competent. I don't know. You'll have to work on it. So that one is the one that I think needs to be changed. These are fine. I mean, with some tweaking of the definitions, I think. Let's see here. Oh, I take out this part and put in maybe some benefits that they will receive from having this. Social capital. This is fine. This definition's good. All right. Moving along here. This is fine. So in this design description section, just indicate that because demand out something like this, you don't have to say this exactly, but because this program is so highly desired and demand outstrips supply, there will always be a holding group or a waitlist group that will serve as a natural control against the intervention group, right? So that way I'll get what you mean. And then you can eliminate this part. interest in participating. We know they do, but have they been approved to participate? And so I would just say, for the purposes of this paper, say they have. So say that the control group will be comprised of people who are on the waiting list, who have been approved by their supervisor, and or have expressed interest in going, something like that. Matea had some points here. Yes, please delete all these SCC definitions and information. I know this already. This is good. I would leave the second post-test in for me. Of course, for the client, they may not have the the resources to do it. But for me, it's just easier to have it consistent. Delete some of this stuff. This is just superfluous stuff that is not necessary. I already know this is a quasi-experiment because of the NR. So for the client, if they want to know all this, definitely keep it in. But for me, it's not necessary. I can tell this from your design that all this is happening. I would prefer you put your energy into really getting the threat section down and nailing down that last outcome and those kind of things. So put your resources more toward that than writing a lot of stuff and over-explaining some of this. So you can put rationale for why you're doing an additional post-test. That's great. And I just highlighted this so you can like substitute in training or whatever. So you can say, because we want to see the lingering effects and ensure that it's a more long-term impact that we're having, we're going to do these 2 post-tests. It's great. So the internal validity threat is just one, actually, so I'm going to delete Matea's comment. I think she might have forgotten. One internal one, 2 construct, 2 stack inclusion, and then 1 external. And I think you do have those in line. So for each of these, can you make sure that it always says type 1 or type 2? Just explicitly write those words, type 1 or type 2. That way I can quickly read your final work and it's not buried in the narrative somewhere about what this is doing, what inference error is happening. How exactly will testing play out? You can take away all these citations, and this again is not a research paper. I'm wanting to know, like, from what you know about this program, why will testing happen in this particular context, in this particular evaluation? Do you think it will sensitize people such that it will somehow mimic the intervention's effects, so that people will become better without the intervention? I don't see this as a really plausible thing that would happen. I don't understand why this would happen. So, so if you want to go with testing, you need to really logically lay out what inference error is going to happen and why will this be happening in your study. I'm trying to think of some other inference errors that might be more likely. And yours is going to be harder for internal validity because the wait list, if everybody's been approved and that's your control, then these people are going to be really similar to each other. So we have to think about, like, maturation might be one. And you can talk about maturation. And, but can it be ruled out with your design? And if it can, that's great. If it can't, that's fine too. So I'm not going to say any more about that. But that's one you could talk about that is probably happening, actually. I think it'd probably be a more plausible one than testing if I'm, thinking about your program. And let's see what else. I'm looking at SCC. The people who go first, would they be systematically different for some reason? Or is it just first come, first serve? I think that's how it works, so I don't know. History events. So thinking about that, could there be a history thing impacting one or both of the groups? And then how would it lead to inference error? Or maybe it won't, and that's fine too. So there are some more to think about. And then for the mitigation, there are easy design controls for testing maturation, RTM if that's concerning. Actually, you should think about RTM for this. I won't say any more, but listen to the screencast and go back to social psych notes too about RTM. I think that you have a design that would be okay for it, but I'll let you think it through. But anyway, there are design controls for RTM, for maturation, one that I'm thinking about specifically, and testing both, that you haven't mentioned in here, and it's a really obvious one. So I would delete all this like researchy and just talk about, in this, particular context, for the maturation, for the testing or whatever, here's how I would disentangle maturation's effects from the program's effects. And that is I would implement this kind of design control, and there are a couple I can think of for maturation actually. And they're all from the prior quizzes, so you can go back and look through the notes where we talked about some of those. Specifically, there's one for history and maturation that's helpful. But you do have a control group, and that does help some things, so keep thinking it through. For the external validity threat, I agree with you so far as what you have, but you need to be specific as to what are those attributes that cause some people to do better in this program than others. And how I see this is a generalizability from sample to the population. So if the population is all the managers at Weyerhaeuser, okay, so specify that. If that's the population that you're thinking about, can we expect that just because our results, we see some results in the sample, does that mean we could expect to see them in the population if we randomly sampled some people who either didn't volunteer or weren't asked? Would we see the same results, or would we see a downward estimate or an upward estimate of the effects? And so think about that. I think you're right insofar as that participants are going to be more motivated to participate, obviously, because they volunteered. They will have different attributes and may benefit more. And so talk about that, and then just say you have a control group, so that's great, but the control group doesn't address the generalizability from sample to population. That's what you'll want to focus on. Treatment diffusion, this is great. Just can you explicitly state type 1 or type 2? I see you're saying that it's a type 2, so just say it. So I have it in my mind when I see your final. Yeah, so you can also take a measure of how much people know. That's going to come up in the pretest of the control group probably. The extent to which you've heard about it from other people. So this isn't a huge deal, but it could be. I mean, who knows? So you could get a read on how much people came in with, but that's going to be in your pretest. I think that's going to be rolled into any pretest. So I like that you pointed that out. So it's fine. It's fine to talk about this one. It's probably not plausible, or I mean, it is plausible, but you can capture it in the pretest. Let's see, assessing. I don't think you mentioned that actually. Measuring implementation. I don't think this is what you're looking for. And maybe if I'm misinterpreting something, my apologies. But I think contaminate. How so? I would think about this as if it's getting to people in the control group or in the population that haven't been selected yet, then you're going to pick it up in the pretest, so it's not going to be that big a deal. But if that's going on, what are you going to see? And it's going to be a type 2, which you did specify. So talk about that. Think that through. I think this is not as relevant, what you're talking about here, isn't as relevant as picking up their prior knowledge. So, again, people in the population who never plan to do this program and never will. So that's one kind of situation. But the other kind is people in the control group, and I think that's what you're talking about, the bleed over into the control. That will simply be whatever they pick up from people who are in the training is simply going to be picked up in their prior knowledge on the pre-assessment. So this one's good. Potentially a problem. I would think, though, that another one you want to think about that is more, I think, plausible than this one is going to be subordinates' ratings of their supervisor. With that, there's always going to be some kind of issue. Potentially contamination, specifically not being honest, giving their supervisor, I should say, upward estimates of their ability because they fear retaliation, or they just don't want to rock the boat, or they want to be in good standing. So I would talk more about what can creep into ratings more than people getting upset, because, I mean, is it really that desirable? Maybe it is. And this is okay too, but it just doesn't seem as plausible to me as actually rating your supervisor and everything that entails, right? Stack inclusion, I like this. There probably is going to be some variability across different deliveries of this. All you need to say is, for mitigation, standardizing as many elements and limiting inconsistencies. The end. This can all go. I like what you said. I think it's great. And you could maybe do a little more detail. There will be a checklist, and ensure that each activity is standardized, the number of minutes that participants are allowed to, be in the activity, talk to each other, whatever. It'll be standardized as much as possible, and then just stop. So this is too much. You're doing too much. Put the energy into thinking about, that last outcome and other things. So this is good. And then restriction of range, that's good. Now, why do you think that will happen? I can think about that contamination piece, where the contamination can cause RR. Specifically, the subordinates in that outcome of manager competence may, coaching competence, or whatever you want to call it eventually, but that they will be, less likely to be honest, so they'll give upward estimates, so you'll have a ceiling effect on some things. It just may be the case, and that could be the case with self-report too, right? When we're rating our own performance, we may want to look good as well, and do an upward estimate. Mitigation, this is where being anonymous is helpful, so that, participants know that their data is safe and that their manager won't retaliate and all those kinds of things. And plus, if these are really great managers to begin with, then you're going to see restriction of range everywhere. Like, they're just going to be rated highly, even before this went into, you might see that, actually. You might see, because everybody was high to start with, you may not see an interventions effect, or you may have restriction of range that you wouldn't see it even if it was there. So anyway, you can think about that part. Yeah, you can't increase this. That's not possible. It's not possible except to except to ensure program activities align with theory. So yes, this is possible actually. And it's possible by ensuring that your manipulation or your program, whichever it is really potent. And so it can cut through the noise. It's really like salient to people. It aligns with theory. It aligns with what we know about human nature and how people learn and all those things. Which I assume that it already is. So I think mostly range restriction is going to be dealt with by helping people to be more honest somehow. So incentivizing them to be more honest on their ratings. Let's see here. I like how you're thinking about this, though. It's really good. It's getting there. Stat analysis, mixed ANOVA. Good job. Yes. So for this, the requirements are for the personnel who are running the evaluation, not necessarily the program. Now I know that sometimes overlaps, and that's okay, but this section is for the program. Same with the timeline. I'm sorry, it's for the evaluation of the program, not the delivery of the program. So same with the timeline, it's for the evaluation itself. All right, so there again, extensive overlap is sort of expected to some degree, but the personnel and the timeline are for the evaluation itself. And be sure that you put the time requirements and the skills needed and the competencies for the people who are running the evaluation. All right, well, I hope that's helpful, Mackenzie. That's a lot. This is getting me thinking too, especially about narrowing that construct, getting it more precise. Thank you for your patience in listening to this. I hope there's some clear things that you feel like you can do, and just get this thing polished up. And again, what you turn in for me will be a little different than for them. I'm sure at least a little bit different. So don't worry about that. Just maximize your learning for this one. And then I'm sure you're going to deliver to them something of value that they can use as well. So I believe in that. I believe in you and your skills. And I think it's going to be a really nice learning experience for you and a good deliverable for the client. All right, take care and good luck with finishing it up.